Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome to Fair Face Fail Productions. So today we're going to be looking at my new to me 2019 Beta Xtrainer 300 two-stroke. So this is a really unique bike that I've honestly been looking at purchasing on and off for years now. I just never pulled the trigger because it always seemed like somebody had something better. But in the end, it's a bike I really wish I would have bought years ago when I had bought my Beta 390 2019 as well. I was looking at the Beta Xtrainers, and you know what? I decided against it because at the time, I was still doing more dual sporty things. The 390, of course, came street legal. I would have gone through the steps to legalize the two-stroke, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. But at the end of the day, I kind of got talked into the 390, and I don't regret that. I love the Beta 390. It's been one of my favorite bikes. I think as far as four-strokes go, there is probably no other bike that I like more. Now, what really makes the Beta Xtrainer quite an amazing bike is that it is lightweight. It's a 300 two-stroke and has a little bit smaller frame, lower seat height, so it makes riding it overall really just a pleasant experience, especially for somebody who's a little bit shorter. And a lot of the reasons why I didn't buy an Xtrainer was because it was presented to me as, oh, hey, that's more of a beginner bike. That's meant for, people who are less experienced. It isn't a full-blown two-stroke. If you're going to get a 300 two-stroke, you might as well just buy the 300RR or the RE. At the time, that was basically what my dealer was telling me, that I was going to be unhappy with it because it didn't have the same amount of power, didn't have as good of a suspension, blah, blah, blah. While there is some truth to those things, I think overall, for your average rider, none of it really applies. The Beta Xtrainer does sit a little bit lower, it does have a little bit less ground clearance, and it does have a suspension that is far softer than the KYBs especially. But that's not a bad thing. It's really not, because when you're in the slow, gnarly stuff, or even just single track in general, the very soft suspension is so compliant over stuff. I found myself riding it actually faster than my Riehu right off the bat. Now the Riehu, I've learned to ride it faster and faster, and you can plow over things at a ridiculous speed with that bike because of its really awesome KYBs. But this bike is just more comfortable. Spending hours on it, I just felt way more relaxed with the bike. It was just an easy, fun bike to ride. Okay, so first things first, let's go over some of the other specs on the bike, just kind of in a linear fashion, so we get kind of the idea of what this bike really is. So, first things first is the seat height. The seat height of the 2019 Beta Xtrainer is 35.8 inches. So that's pretty awesome. That's quite a bit shorter than my Riehu. I believe the Riehu is above 38, so that's pretty sweet. I think the average for most dirt bikes is around 37, so saving a little over an inch to two, close to 2 inches, that's pretty awesome. Next real feature of the Beta Xtrainer is electronic oil injection. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm kind of in the middle, as long as it doesn't fail, I suppose. I just don't really care. I really like that you don't have to premix the fuel. This is awesome as far as the rental business goes because people just throw gas in it. We'll keep the oil topped off and it won't be an issue. If the oil injection fails, the bike blows up, then that's a mechanical failure of the bike, so I know it wasn't the renter necessarily. So in some ways that makes our jobs a little bit easier. And then their biggest claim to fame is the low weight of 216 pounds, the lightest 300cc off-road motorcycle on the planet. Now, we'll get it on the scale and see what it actually weighs with gas in it. I have no idea what that figure is taken into account. But it's pretty light, though. I know it's a fair bit lighter than the Riehu, a fair bit lighter than any of our bikes, so it's pretty sweet. No real complaints there. The usual things like an adjustable power valve, so of course that's a Betasm. The Beta 300 in this bike is pretty much the same engine as the 300RR. It's just it's got a different power valve spacer in it, different power valve settings, different pipe, of course. So you're going to get a lot more detuned power hit to make it soft and linear. And still have quite a bit of power. In fact, I didn't really think that the bike was underpowered. In fact, riding in the low to mid-range, the Xtrainer really loved being in the mid-range especially, but off the low and into the mid-range, it felt pretty much similar to the power of the Riehu. Maybe a tad bit less, But overall, it was very comparable. Yeah, sure, once you get into the top end, there pretty much is no top end on the Xtrainer, but not exactly what it's for. If you short shift it and stay on it real hard, especially in single track, you'll keep up with your buddies, no problem. And of course, for brakes, it comes with some standard kind of Nissan brakes. The brakes feel very beta. I don't think there's anything out of the extraordinary there, but they do say or claim it's a wide ratio transmission. I'd have to look up the ratios, but really, truthfully, the bike felt like it had a very short geared transmission. My gosh, I think I was doing like 25 miles an hour at 6th gear, although previous owner may have geared it down from what the original is, so that could be that. Nonetheless, I absolutely love the low gearing on it, because in 1st gear you can pretty much keep the clutch out at all times, even when you're doing like 2-3 miles an hour, and just hammer on it. And then if you need to slip the clutch to pop the front up, I did that in a way that was quite interesting, so hopefully you'll enjoy that in the video. As far as power goes and what it's actually tuned to, a lot of people are guesstimating, I suppose, that yeah, the bike has around 40 horsepower. I would probably say it's probably a little bit like more than that, but maybe about right because of its lightweight too. It feels really good. At the end of the day, you have to go ride an Xtrainer and kind of get a feel for it. And if you really want more power out of the Xtrainer, I suppose you can pretty much change it up to where it's the stock 300 configuration and get way more power out of it. So that's kind of a your choice kind of thing. Now, another thing I really want to talk about here as well is that the power map switch actually is pretty useful. I noticed that when I switched to the rain mode, there was definitely far more torque down low. That was interesting. I'm guessing they retarded the ignition timing quite a bit. Boy, it felt pretty torquey down low. In fact, I liked it because it really allowed me to be kind of a little bit more lazier with my gear changes. So, and then of course you get a little bit more peppiness and a little bit more power in the high-powered map. It's not as drastic as my Riehu, but you know what? It's there, and I liked messing with it. It was fine. I think newer riders especially would appreciate the rain map. All right, we'll check out kind of the elephant in the room, and the reason why everybody doesn't like the Xtrainer is the suspension. So I'll start off with saying that I really like the suspension. I'm not a fast rider. I'm a trail rider. I generally enjoy either riding slower or being on single track that's pretty difficult, where you're not really riding fast, and a softer suspension is generally preferred anyway. So with that all being said, a lot of people really down on the Xtrainer of not being able to ride it fast, not the suspension not being compliant enough or good enough, and people want to upgrade it, so on and so forth. If you're in that camp where you're maybe riding faster tracks, you're racing fast enduros or desert racing, the Xtrainer just really isn't for you. I mean, obviously the 300RR, 300RE exists for a reason, so I probably wouldn't look towards this bike. But if you're riding woods, you're tight, slow, technical stuff, or if maybe you're a little bit shorter rider, these kinds of things, I think, for the most part, when you're doing that kind of riding, this bike fits that niche, and so does the suspension. In fact, I really appreciated it. I think the overly stiff MR Pro suspension that I have on the Riehu is too much for me. I don't generally ride to that level. Probably never will. I'm pretty casual in how I ride, so I'd prefer something a little bit softer. I will say, however, I did bottom the forks out, and I think the suspension overall out when I was on this ride, so out in Rampart Range, Colorado, doing some single track. 379B's got some pretty wicked, I don't even know if they'd be called whoops, they're just like holes in the ground pretty much. So, and if you hit them too hard on the Xtrainer, yeah, you find the end of the forks. Now, I found the end of the forks on that same track with pretty much all of my bikes. Now, the Riehu, I can plow over those. No joke. I can hit those real fast and hard, and it does not care. You just have to be willing to take the brutality of that bike the rest of the day. So it's a trade-off. There are disadvantages to a soft suspension like the Xtrainer setup, and you really have to know what you're riding. I don't think it's bad or good. It really depends on who you are and what you're doing. Next, we'll talk about another potential downside of the 2019 year specifically. I think a lot of these issues were solved in the consecutive years, but the 2019 betas, like even my 390, suffered from some pretty annoying electrical problems overall, from charging issues to things not being connected correctly, to not having waterproof plugs, to having to need to dielectric grease everything, to using gauges of wiring that they should have gone with something a little bit thicker, to using crimps instead of soldering, blah blah blah. There's just a lot of things that it's an Italian bike. European bikes, European electronics, they tend to do these kinds of things. You know, and it's not that the Japanese are free from blame on that side, but yeah, the 19s were a little rough. My Beta 390 came with a defective wiring harness from the factory. Basically, the charging voltage to the battery wouldn't go over 13 volts, so pretty much was only charging a lead-acid battery to like 80%, maybe 60 or 70%. It wasn't ideal, so I had to replace that harness. Now, I will say, Beta did replace these harnesses. They did stand behind their products, so on and so forth. And the Xtrainer had some minor issues as well in this department. I know there's a lot of ground fixes and other things that the previous owner already did, so not worried about it for this one. Something to keep an eye out for when you buy a 2019. I still think they're amazing bikes, still worth buying. Just keep in mind that you may have to kind of chase down some electrical gremlins. And with that, I know the dashes were considered to be pretty horrendous. So if it goes out, just throw it in the trash, and I'd say go buy a Trail Tech or something. No big deal there. Another common issue, which was to the betas of this era, was the thermostat housing. So yes, the two-stroke did have a thermostat on it. I think all of them do now. There's pros and cons to the thermostat, and I know a lot of people don't like it. The 19s, much like my Beta, they were common, or my Beta 390, I should say, they were common to have that actually leak. So the housing would like get weak over time, and it would I don't know if it would warp or crack. It's probably more likely to crack, and then they would start leaking coolant. Eventually, you run out of coolant and you overheat. So not good. My previous owner on this bike bypassed it, so it's an open flow system. That's fine, really, for our needs. The only thing that I will say is that if you do that and you ride in colder climates like we do, if it's sub-freezing, it does take substantially longer for the bike to come up to operating temperature with it open looped like that. So that's only annoying to me. And it could be a thing for renters as well, because I don't want people really ramming on it hard till the bike's warmed up, and that just kind of exasperates. But then again, how many people are riding in sub-freezing temperatures? Probably not many. So overall, who is this bike for? Who should really be buying a Beta Xtrainer? And I really think it comes down to pretty much anybody can, and everybody would probably really enjoy it. So the previous owner of this Xtrainer is a man who owns, he owned this Beta Xtrainer. He has a TM 300. He also has a KTM of some sort out there too. So he's got pretty much all of his bases covered for different types of bike. But one of the things when we talked about this bike quite a bit was that there were a lot of situations, because it was lighter and it's a broad torque range and stuff. It was easier to do single track, and he outrode a lot of people on seemingly more capable bikes. So I think especially if you're a skilled rider, this bike could be a lot of fun as a play bike in some slow, gnarly single track. I really think that's what he loved the bike for, and he's buying another Xtrainer. I think he's picking up a brand new 23 or something like that. So making no mistakes there. So if you're looking to rent a Beta Xtrainer or try this out and see if it's something that you would like, feel free to come out to A&M Moto Toys. We're in Monument, Colorado. Look us up. We're all on Google and everything these days. And you can come and try it out. I know the newer Beta Xtrainers, I think in 2022, they started giving them a little bit more power, a little bit more top end, a little bit more of an engine redesign. I also think the new engine is of course counterbalanced, where this one is not. But, not a whole lot of differences. I think the stylistic and suspension stuff still very similar, and the way the bike rides is still pretty much the same. So, yeah, it'd be a good time for you to pick one up, see if you like it, and then, you get a feel for a new one if you take it around a lot or something. But, it's always better. I think it's always was our goal here, was to be able to have people come and rent bikes, try things out that either nobody else rents them or whatever else, so you can make a better informed decision on the bike that you want to buy. But I hope you enjoyed our ride out here in Rampart. I'm going to apologize. I'll probably throw an apology at the beginning. I forgot. My camera angle really sucks. I've since kind of flipped the camera around, and we're going to make that angle a little bit better. The new mounting on my helmet seems to be a lot lower than my last helmet, so we're just kind of playing with that. So I apologize for the not as good footage, but we had a fun day today. Took out some new people on some single track, and this was their first real long single track. Also had a lot of fun with the RAR Mantis, doing pretty much a range test. So go check out Meeker Extreme's channel on that. These electric dirt bikes are a lot of fun and very capable. But thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one. Ferret Face out.